In this travel guide, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about getting to Koh Samui, Koh Phangan, and Koh Tao by boat. I'll show you the main types of transport, the prices of each one, when they leave, and how to catch the boats, including my recommendations for which boats are best. I'll also tell you how to catch these boats from further away destinations such as Bangkok, Phuket, and Krabi. I'm Jack and I run a Thailand-based travel agency. If you want your trip planned for you with expert advice, or you just simply don't want to have to deal with the hassle of figuring out the boats yourself, please get in touch through my website, jj-adventures.online, and we'll help you plan your trip of a lifetime. Koh Phangan, Koh Samui, and Koh Tao are three of the most popular islands lying in the Gulf of Thailand. If you're going to arrive on these islands, you will almost certainly have to take a boat to get there, with the only exception being Koh Samui, which has an airport itself. However, flights are quite infrequent to Koh Samui, and they're more expensive than elsewhere, so most people opt to take the boat. Let's find out how. So there are two main ports that you can leave from the mainland to get to the islands, and they are Chumpon and Surat Thani, also known as Donsak Pier. Boats usually run to all three islands in succession. So for example, boats will leave from Surat Thani, then go to Samui, then Phangan, Koh Tao, and finally end in Chumpon. If they're leaving from the other direction, they'll go the other way. The length of time it takes to do the journey depends on which type of boat you take. There are three types of boat that you can consider. One is Lompraya, which runs catamarans and speedboats. Second type is companies like Songsom or Seatran, which run ferries. And the final one is the night boat. Let's start with Lompraya because I believe this is the best option for most people because it's the quickest and most convenient. It runs from Surat Thani at 11 a.m. and 2:30 p.m. It takes about an hour to get from Surat Thani to Samui, another half an hour to get to Koh Phangan, another hour to Koh Tao, and then another hour to Chumpon. It leaves from Chumpon at 7 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. and takes a similar amount of time, but in the other direction. If you're not traveling from the mainland, you're simply traveling between the islands. So for example, you're traveling from Samui to Koh Phangan or from Koh Tao to Koh Phangan, then there are even more boats that it runs, including speedboats that'll get you there even quicker. So there are more options available. Another major advantage of using Lompraya is that they also run a bus company, which can take you to other places in the mainland. So for example, if you're traveling from far away or two places far away, like Bangkok, Krabi, or Phuket, once the boat lands, a boat will pick you up and take you directly to that destination. You don't need to worry about getting to the bus station and then figuring out the bus to take from there. You just buy one ticket and it'll take care of you for the rest of the journey, which makes it the most convenient in my opinion. And definitely the best option if you're traveling to these places that are further away and you're not flying there. In general, the experience of traveling on the Lompraya is quite nice. It's quite comfortable seating and there's quite a lot of space. However, they do fill up, so some people will have to be outside, which might be a problem if it's very sunny and hot or if it's raining. What are the disadvantages of taking the Lompraya? Well, it is probably the worst option if you're someone who gets seasick. Because it's a faster boat, it's more mobile, but also less stable, so it tends to rock more. And people who feel seasickness are more prone to getting seasick on this boat. Now, I recently traveled on the Lompraya over Christmas, and the weather was really bad. There was a few horror stories. Everyone on the islands had a horror story about being on the boat. Ours was no different, including one story which is really bad, which I'll tell you about later. But this boat was extremely rocky. A lot of people were vomiting on it. In fact, one person even passed out and had to be stretchered off once we got to Koh Tao. So it was a pretty bad experience. However, this was not a typical experience. The weather was really bad. It was typhoon season. So I would hope that you wouldn't have quite an extreme experience. However, it's something to consider when taking this option. The other problem with Lompraya is that it is generally the most expensive option, with tickets being about 900 to 1,200 for one way on the ferry. So if you want a cheaper option, you may take the Seatran or Songsom as well. Now let's talk about the ferries ran by boat companies called Songsom or Seatran. If you're concerned about getting seasick or you have a little bit more time and you just don't want to go on a rocky boat, then this might be the best option for you. These boats are considerably larger than a Lompraya, which means they're less rocky and more stable, which therefore makes you less seasick. They also have the advantage of having a snack shop on there and more toilets available. So if comfort is your thing, this might be a better option for you. They are a bit slower than the catamaran, so they will add time onto your trip. From Surat Thani to Koh Samui, it takes about an hour and a half on these types of boat, which is 30 minutes longer than the Lompraya. If you're traveling from Surat Thani to Koh Samui or Koh Phangan, it appears that these boats run very often, running about once an hour. So there's almost always a boat to get on here. They run slightly less frequently to Chumpon and Koh Tao. I suppose because they're smaller places and less people want to visit them. So if you're flying into Surat Thani, it might actually be quicker to take this boat because they run more often, and therefore you might be able to get on an earlier boat and still arrive earlier. These types of boat have the added advantage of being a bit cheaper, usually about 300 to 500 baht one way. If you're already on the islands, there may not even be a need to book these tickets online. You might be able to buy it from a vendor or maybe even your hotel. These vendors will have the information to tell you which boat is the most convenient for you and which one will help you to arrive quickest. Okay, let's talk about the night ferries. There's also a night ferry that runs between the islands, and this is the cheapest option, costing about 200 to 300 baht. From Chumpon to Koh Tao, it takes around 6 hours, and it takes about 9 hours total to finish the journey in Surat Thani. So it's considerably longer than the other boats. So I don't actually recommend taking these boats. When we were there and the weather was terrible, one of these boats actually sank. This was on the same day that we arrived when people were vomiting. In the evening, one of these night boats just about got to Koh Tao and it eventually sank about 15 miles offshore. Everyone had to be evacuated in the early morning. Luckily, no one was hurt, but everyone's stuff got lost. We spoke to people on Koh Tao about this type of boat, and they said that it's not a surprise that it happened. These boats should have been shut down a long time ago. They're in really terrible condition. So for your safety, I would recommend not taking these boats, especially when the weather is not very good. So these are the three major types of transport that you can take between the islands. Please note that the ferries can be cancelled at any time due to bad weather, although how it wasn't cancelled when I was there and the weather was bad, I don't know. So if you have a long distance flight straight after this, you might want to take that into consideration just to make sure that you don't miss your flight. Journeys on these boats often take longer than the stated times, so please be careful. I almost missed my flight from Surat Thani after this because we arrived maybe 2 hours later than that. Luckily, I managed to get on in the end. However, there are signs all over saying that these companies do not take responsibility for missed flights, so you won't get a refund on your flight or anything like that. So please keep that in mind as well. If you do get seasick, I would recommend buying some seasick tablets. You can buy them pretty much anywhere in Thailand from a pharmacy. I saw some people had invested in a seasickness bag as well, which I thought was quite useful. So people were vomiting into these bags and it wasn't going anywhere, which was definitely a useful thing to have on the boat that I was on. Like I said at the beginning of the video, if you would like all of this taken care of for you, please get in touch with me through my website, jj-adventures.online, and we'll help you plan your trip, including all the transport that you need to get around the country. Now, if you're traveling to these islands, how about you check out my video, The Top Things to Do in Koh Tao.